the practical reality is that sentences have gone up a very great deal in recent decades. Release points have been extended. They used to be 50%. Now, for many, or for some offences, it's 2/3. And our proposals were to bring most of those back down to 50%.
Prison managers say Andy Burnham's decision to suspend the early release scheme from prisons in England and Wales has caused chaos. He's reviewing the programme after the outpouring of anger that two men found guilty of the manslaughter of PC Andrew Harper were going to be released early. The prisons are almost full. The crisis is absolutely real. No one can deny that. There are currently more than 87,000 prisoners, but that is down from the peak, and there are now 3,000 spare places. So can the Prime Minister find a way to change who is released early? The early release plan was based on the recommendations from a review by the former Conservative Justice Secretary David Gauke, who joins us now. David, morning to you.
Morning, Stig.
How do you feel about this review?
So, look,
just
at this issue, I think the issue that he will find, I suspect, is that there are still issues with the prison population. At the moment, there is more spare capacity than there was, which is good news. But we shouldn't consider spare capacity as something that has to be filled, because you do need resilience within the system. And even though you might have some spare places, they're not necessarily the right spare places. And the practical reality is that sentences have gone up a very great deal in recent decades. Release points have been extended. They used to be 50%. Now, for many, or for some offences, it's 2/3. And our proposals were to bring most of those back down to 50%. And if we don't take action, then we are going to find ourselves with the prisons and prison capacity under pressure once again.
But are you confident, David, that this is being done in a humane and sensible way in all cases? So we had, at the beginning of this programme, a woman who was raped when she was 14, and the guy who did it got 9 years. She then got a standardised email, nothing else in it other than the standard email saying this guy may well be let out because of the early sentencing. She's worked out herself that it could be as soon as next year, which would mean he serves 3 years for the crime. And she's devastated. We had her on. She's broken by this. So there's the question of whether this guy should be allowed out early. There's the question of how it's being managed. There's no personal support. There's no reference to exclusion zones. There's no reference to tagging. There's nothing that would reassure her that her life is not going to be ruined again by this guy who's ruined her life once. That cannot be acceptable in a modern country, that a woman has to endure that after justice has seemingly been done.
I can't comment on every communication and so on. You raise an important point in terms of how this is communicated with victims. One of the points that we made in our sentencing review is I think we do need to be clearer with victims. I think if we can have an established system that stays in place for some time so that there aren't changes, so that you don't have emergency releases, that you can work on a long-term basis so that victims can properly understand how the system operates, how much time people will spend inside, how much time they will spend in the community being supervised, then you can build confidence that way. One of the problems, I think, is a long-term problem that we have is sometimes as a system, we've given the impression that people are going, they hear the sentence length and they think, right, that's going to be, 10 years inside, when the reality is somewhat different. And of course, we've got to get better at communicating.
But the only reason you've had to do this report...
That's not a new issue.
No, but the only reason you've had to do this report is that the system is rubbish. And so why would proposing early release make the system better? The same system, the failed probation system, the failed communication system, the failed prison system, still exists, David. So of course they'll cock this up, because they cock everything up, which is why you were asked to look at this in the first place.
Well, the circumstances when I was asked to look at this is that the government had come in, and to be fair, whoever was in government was going to have to do this. They had to bring in a short-term emergency release system where there was very little notice. If we are in a situation where the system is able to plan, is able to identify these people are going to be released some months in advance, so that preparations can be made for both the offenders and for victims. That is a much better system than a system that stumbles through, fills all the places that we have, then finds there's an overcapacity crisis, and then very quickly has to come up with some bodge system of getting through the next few weeks. Otherwise,
I understand. The reality is,
and that strategic approach is absolutely necessary.
But it's not working in practice to some people. Well, here's what I don't understand. I've never understood this. Perhaps you can explain this to me. The release is based on sentence length, not nature of crime. What I don't understand is, why not simply say people who've committed a certain type of offence, take violent or sexual offences, they're not eligible for early release. If you look at the numbers in prison, mostly 25,000 violent, 16,000 sexual. I get that. They're the highest proportion of offenders. But theft is 6,000. There are 9,000 people in prison for drugs offences. Why not go after those people and say, if you've committed a sexual offence, it doesn't matter what sentence you've got, you're not getting out early?
So 2 points on that. The first is, as you say, a very large proportion of people in prison are there for sexual offences or violent offences, and our job of doing the independent sentence review would have been a lot easier if prison was full of people who had been late in paying their TV licence. That isn't the case. And the people who are there for quite a long time tend to be violent and sexual offenders. So you can't ignore them given the scale of the crisis. The second point, Stig, and I think it's a really interesting issue here. But let's take somebody who the courts, having seen all the facts, all the information, all the mitigating factors and so on, determined that one offender is put inside for 8 years and another offender is put inside for 4 years. The courts have looked at all the facts, all the circumstances. Now, do we say that the person who has got a 4-year sentence is automatically more serious than the person who's got an 8-year sentence because the person with 8 years has committed fraud and the person with 4 years has committed a violent or sexual offence of some description?
Well, I think the quality of the offence matters. That's exactly my point. I think you get put in a long time for things. Say you're a massive drug dealer. Let's use that example. Massive drug dealer, and you can make the argument, cause misery for loads of people. I understand that point. Massive drug dealer in for a long time. I think that person should be released sooner than a sexual offender who might have been put in prison for 4 years. I just think that's just a matter of common sense. There's one person I'm more comfortable being on the streets than the other. The quality of the offence is the condition to me, not the length of the sentence.
So, look, in terms of the nature of offence, of course, is taken into account by the courts when determining the sentence. And look, I happen to agree with you. One of the things we actually hinted at or touched upon in our review is that I think there is a very good case for looking again at sentencing for drugs offences. But that is not going to solve our particular problem. But as I say, of course, the nature of the offence is important. And it is one of the factors that the courts take into account when they sentence. It's clearly something.
I understand, David, and yet we have a rape victim telling us that this bloke's going to go out after 3 years, and she's terrified. And that whatever the laudable attempts of this, that can't be the right outcome.
And I'd also make the point, and I would say I can't comment on the individual case, but I would make the point that, rightly in my view, sentences for rape have been extended considerably over recent decades, and right. I think that is absolutely the right thing to do. But as I say, I think you can end up if you look at purely the offence and ignore the wider circumstances which the courts are able to do when determining sentence length, then I think you will also end up with some perverse outcomes.
David, interesting stuff. We're going to see where this takes us. We'll see what this review means, if it means anything when he gets around to doing it. David, good to speak to you.